Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of SuperFantaFi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season 1 finale of Tokyo Override. Great season finale. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So, first and foremost, this could be a season finale, could be a series finale. That could always be retroactively changed, but for now, I'm going to go with the season finale, and like I said, we'll talk about that more and potentially what the future could be at the end of this, but obviously, we're picking up in the aftermath of last episode. Basically, our crew is gathering data from different entry points into the city because the wall data, anytime like something gets flagged by the system, there has to be a human who looks into it and goes like, okay, like it's kind of just it gets rolled off. It's like an error in the system and that data is deleted. So that's kind of how Iwuji's kind of covered her tracks up until now. That's also how she would have gone. She's going through the process of protecting Suma Garage when they were like pseudo working together, obviously not knowing she was using them and, a bad person, but either way. But yeah, basically they're going to like the modules to these walls so they can like download that data because it's like the data's not completely gone. The it's still kind of almost like you can kind of somewhat system restore that data. And basically they want to gather evidence about Iwuji's involvement and allowing tagless people go. Like it was little by little, they were gathering that data from all these different entry points into the city. And basically they were transferring everything over to Kai. That was kind of like what Tari and Spoke were kind of handling on that side of things. While like the rest are trying to like sneak their way in. And they were able to get in, but the problem was that they had upgraded the system, so Kai's hack didn't go through all the way, so they still got flagged by the system. And now it's like, okay, it's a race of, after collecting all this data, we got it at the bare minimum. We got to get to, you can't, this isn't enough because we have to go directly to the digital ministry and download it in there because anything up until any other way it could be interfered with. So it's like the moment you do this, there's no getting around it. So, and I think this kind of speaks volume when you look at the episode, like all the stuff that's happening, all the changes that are happening to the city, no one's batting an eye. You catch the little glimpses of people being like, oh, what's going on? But that's like the bare minimum amount of people are noticing because it's just everyday life where they're just like, right, if the city's doing something, there's got to be a reason for it. It can't be out of, like only a few people throughout the episode. And I was like, I think that's such an interesting artistic choice where it's like the city isn't in chaos because the city's like, oh, the city's going to do what it's doing. Like when you're used to the city being this automated system, you're just like, well, that's why I was like a couple, was it last episode, the whole situation of Iwuji like diverting people and having to move on the system, like she's like, yes, some people will notice, but most people are just gonna be like, whatever it is. It's kind of like you gave yourself over to the system, so you're just kind of like fine with the automation. So you're not gonna be like, oh yeah, it's doing what it's doing. I don't gotta think too much about it. It's that type of thing. So, and I think that's such like taking that thread and just kind of adding it to the nth degree with everything that's going down because Iwuji sends out the little drone things after them. And so, like, Watari separates from Spoke, who's diverting all of those. Watari's gathering more data and sending it to Kai. And that's when Iwuji picks up on, like, okay, so you're sending it to Kai, whatever. We don't know what the contents of the data are, but there's large pockets of data being sent to her in very specific intervals. So it's like, all right, Iwuji's like, I know what you're up to now. So she specifically starts targeting Kai and Hugo. Hugo held out a lot longer than I thought he was because I was thinking that was going to be a big issue that, like when you start seeing his vision blur, like he still hasn't recovered from his wounds. He's still pretty hurt, but still held on, steadfast. But the problem is Iwuji starts utilizing the protocol that they introduced in episode 3 during the race, where basically the map of the city can change, road routes can change just for the purposes. And obviously it's like, in this case, it's like, oh, we're activating like an anti-terrorism program right now. And so it's changing the roads, it's locking off paths and stuff like that. But just like previously, Kai is able to kind of hack into it and she's able to read. And it's like, Hugo be like, oh my God, it's like basically predicting the future of the roadmap. And they're skirting by and skating by. And Iwuji's pissed about it. So she does a big no-no. She directly like interacts with the map, and there's big X's be like, nope, 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 don't do that, don't do that. So that's super illegal what she did it, because it's like, right, you can interfere to a certain extent, but it's like, to go as extreme as she did, she literally reached into the digital map and crushed the bridge piece that they were on, and they fell. It's like, yeah, she's like, because even Kageyama's like, I was not expecting her to go that far with all of this, you know, to go to such lengths. It's like, so luckily Hugo and Kai are okay. I thought it was interesting. She had that, like, she woke up in the garage. I was like, at first I was like, did like Hugo drag her somewhere? To, like, but it was like, no, that looks like it's Suma garage. I was like, it has to be a dream. And Hugo's there pulling a bike apart. He's kind of like, yeah, it's all hope is lost. Like, what's the point of having a bike? Like, this is too hard. This is too much of a, like, too hard to go against. And it's like, the odds are too stacked against us. And then like Hugo turns into Kai, and it's like, why do you ride? And so for her, it's like, no, like, wake up. She stops the machines from, because like subconsciously that was her brain, like, doing that, because like, well, everything that's going on, but also these machines were over here tearing apart Hugo's bike, shut them down, made sure Hugo was okay, and then took off on her own, because it's like, right, this is too important. Like, I have to see this through. And she does. And she's able to handle all the predictions of like what, you know, she's able to see all the changes Iwuji's making, but the problem is, like, once again, she can directly interact with the map, but Kai starts hijacking that on her own and creates her own road, which is like very beautiful and very poetic. And you're just like, yeah, like, you know, this freedom you have, and you're kind of, you know, determining your own route, your own road, both metaphorically and literally in this case. So anytime Iwuji tries to interfere again, it's like, no, Kai just reroutes herself. And it's pretty impressive. Hugo's about to get gained up on by those drones, but luckily, was it Amarian? I believe, I could be misremembering. The racer from episode 3 showed up, so everyone else was dealing with some stuff, but luckily they had, you know, called in a favor from a friend in that regard. Kai did. I also love that it's just kind of this small little thing. At one point when like Hugo and Kai were weaving around, like she was showing him the routes to go and stuff like that. I love that moment where like Watari's dad was like, yeah, and then Kageyama was like, yeah, and Watari's dad looks at him, I was like, oh, kind of like, oh, this is kind of weird being on the same side as you and you cheering for, you know, it feels a little weird. I just love that moment. But either way, it comes down to it, and Kai is making her way towards the building and ends up making like a straight shot bridge to where she needs to go, like on the building where Iwuji is. But Iwuji stops the bridge short, and it's like, ha, you can't do anything about it. But Kai did a badass thing of like all the vehicles there, like those transport vehicles, those trucks, she just basically had them empty their contents, and then she like basically had them form a bridge that slammed into the building, and then she burst through, which I was like, that's super badass. And yeah, she ends up downloading everything, made her, as she said, delivery of the ledger and stuff like that from the deliveries and stuff, and how much Iwuji knew and how much she was covering up, and all that was put in the system, and there's nothing you can do about it beyond that. So, and everything kind of gets returned to its normal state, and everything kind of goes back, and I think that it kind of fits the narrative thing too of, yeah, everything's back to the status quo it's meant to. So I was like, and especially how they covered up, they were like, oh yeah, there was some like error in the system, that's all it was. It's like the last thing you don't want to publicly admit, yeah, someone hacked into our system and did that. It's like, you don't want that, because it takes away your control and stuff. So I was like, what happens from here? I mean, obviously it ends up sadly getting swept under the rug, because I love that. I think, I don't know if love, but I think it's so interesting making it such an unsatisfying thing of like, yeah, Iwuji got caught and basically got let go, but she will never be charged, because she's like, the very system decided I would not be, it's too much to go through, because it's such a public thing, and it would probably, like, the domino effects of such a big spectacle and whole thing would draw too much attention. It's like, it's too much of an overload on the system. So it's like, the easiest thing is just remove her from the system. So no longer, Iwuji would never be able to continue doing what she's doing, but she would never actually be properly punished. But kind of being kicked out of the system might be a punishment in of itself. Because she even said, like, right, she might got her freedom, but she's kind of like, there's no like algorithm or anything that would say like this is a satisfying end for my story. Like, right, you wouldn't get the satisfaction of like she got locked up, but she also doesn't have the because she believes in the system so much and tried to, in her mind, like do good. Because Kageyama's like, I want to understand your motives, and for her, it's like it's all about optimizing the system. And he's like letting drugs like Rain do its thing. And also letting kids like die, like those kids' blood are on your hands, and it's like, yes, but it's kind of like you got to crack a few eggs to make an omelet type of thing. Or like there has to be some necessary evil in the means of create. So it's kind of like we let certain things play out because it's the most optimal way to optimization, which I'm like, I don't understand that rationale of all of this, how that really plays out. Because I guess it's like building the system in a certain way to have things move in an optimized way. It's kind of like there's a certain level of evil and terrible things you can let go by. Because if you try and fight every little thing, like you're going to overload the system. So it's like, this is the best outcome. It's like, yes, there's some grimy, terrible things about it. But it's that thing of, okay, 99%, everything's Gucci, except for this 1%. And it's like, are we going to let this 1% be the reason why we don't aim for the 99% optimization? That's my interpretation of that, you know? And she even talks about it from Kageyama. She's like, yeah, you know, let me ask, you know, she was coming at him from the perspective of, you know, as the one guy who could never find the drug kingpin behind all this stuff and stuff like that, who can never find like because it's like, well, it all worked out in the end. Because I mean, I think all the people involved with the highway situation, I mean, we do see Kageyama and his partner arresting people later, so I don't know if that necessarily is related to the highway stuff or that's something else. It's like, at the end of the day, all the highway people ended up dying regardless, so I don't know if, like, that's kind of been nipped in the bud, but yeah. Iwuji's just going to live as, like, from your perspective, as a detective who could never, like, you know, someone in your situation, how would you go about living your life? And he's like, my life is my life and your life is your life. Kind of figure it out on you. And she's like, I guess I will, and bounces. So it's like that's this thing of like it's meant to leave a sour taste in your mouth, but it's like you stop this, you know, and you got her out of the system, but she doesn't get to pay. Like I'd assume everyone at Suma Garage knows this because obviously none of that was made public, and they never. I guess they never expected it to be made public. They just wanted to stop Iwuji from doing what she's doing. And this is the closest you can get to a punishment. It's not exactly justice, but it's the closest you can get to some extent. So, but we see. Oh God, I keep forgetting. Like it's Mikuria, I believe. I keep forgetting the guy that she was responding to. Like, he knew what she was up to, and he's kind of skating by. But I guess, like, Iwuji's removal hamstrings him a tiny bit. So it's kind of like, that's where it's like, there's still enough story threads that you can pull on going forward. So, but obviously, like, you know, Kai's found, you know, her home with Suma Garage. Everything's resolved for this story. And, you know, she's at the garage fixing stuff up. Obviously, Amurin is there as well. I'm sure she's going to... I could definitely see, like, probably going forward... I don't know. She could be probably a lot more of a recurring character potentially in the future, you know, depending on how they want to handle that. But Kai goes out, you know, it's like, oh, where are you going to go? She's like, I don't know. I haven't decided yet. And goes out for a ride. And like I said, we see Kageyama arresting some people, so still doing his thing despite everything. So I don't know how much of a run-in this group would have with him going forward, but it's still possible. We work together, this guard, and you're not necessarily criminals. You are, you know, delivery, you know, so there's that element to it. And then we see, like I said, Mikuria, like I said, I think that's his name, just staring out. Like I said, I don't know what that means in the long run. He has to find maybe a new Iwuji, or maybe like Iwuji was like, took the brunt of it, but maybe even he still got some, like, there was still some backlash against him for all of this. And, you know, so maybe like he can't do things the way he wants to, because he believed in what she was doing too, because he believed in the whole like, oh, I'm finding the best optimization for everything in the city, and how much of an effect, like this small story, how much of an effect this will have in the long run, removing someone like Iwuji and probably limiting, or like I said, hamstringing him to some extent. Mikuria, like, have some lasting effects. We don't know. We also have like the Ayumi thing, where I think that spot she goes to at the end of the episode is where her and Kai meet up. So she was probably hoping like, oh, maybe I'll run into Kai or something. But she hears the engine of the bike and she kind of smiles. So once again, they're never going to probably be friends again. But who knows what the future holds? Maybe things can change. But maybe she's kind of like happy, like, oh, at least Kai's kind of found her freedom. It's like, oh, that's nice. But it's like, I don't know how much an effect this had on Ayumi going forward. So we'll see. Like, that's where it's like, this could be like a finale. Because at the time you're recording this, because it's the 10th of December at the time you're recording this, I'm going to say I'm getting to this late. So it's been like, this came out like what? Maybe like 2.5 weeks or so. I'd say about 2.5 weeks maybe. At the time we're recording this, there hasn't been any announcement on whether or not there is a season 2. There's still plenty of room of like, you could end this here if you want to, like just making this small story the small story it is, but there's always more story you could tell in the future. Like, we don't really know much about Hugo, Spoke, Watari, really how they met. You can dive into that if you want to, but there's also like things of like, yeah, that's a story in itself, but it could also be a thing of you never go into that. Like, there's plenty more story to tell in this city and just more deliveries and what things could turn into, but it could just be like a one and done. I believe the production on this was like 3.5 years, I think I saw. Obviously, with everything kind of set up as it is now, like when you have like a lot of designs and I think a lot of the models, that'll lessen the time, like if there is going to be a season 2, but it still will take a while. Once again, animation takes a while, even when you have like the models and stuff like that. Like I'm not a animator, so I'm not going to try and downplay how difficult it is to animate stuff, but it's kind of like, I mean, once again, not everything's the same, but I treat it like video games, where it's like, if you have the models and the groundwork of one game and then you're moving into a sequel, it won't be as long unless you're doing a massive overhaul. I don't know if that's fully equatable when it comes to animation, especially like this particular animation. But like I said, I believe I saw that the production for this was being worked on for like 3.5 years. So like I said, the time could be probably reduced to a decent chunk because of having already done the entire first season. But you know, once again, that's coming from a point of ignorance. So I would love a season 2 because I'd love to see where this goes, explore things even more. Like I said, like not everything's kind of resolved, and I don't know if there's going to be any changing the city. Like this world is what it is, this city is what it is, and can you really change that? As long as you're able to find your little pockets of freedom in it, which our characters do, including Kai. She found her freedom when she was so boxed in and lost and felt like such a blank slate. Like, she being able to just ride her bike and feel the wind on her hands, that's enough for her. And that's, like I said, that in itself could be like, yeah, this is just a one and done anime, but it could always be more if the creative force gets the opportunity and feels that they have more story to tell. Like I said, I haven't seen anything, or at least, and quick Google search, I could be wrong. If there's information out there that says otherwise, do let me know in the comments, whether it's now or in the future. Anyone that might come across this like months or years from now, you know, I could always come back here and change this from a season 1 finale to a series finale type of thing. Unless it was like a thing of like it got canceled, then I'm still going to keep it. That's a me thing. I'm not going. But yeah, like I said, whether or not there's room for more story, but this story and that it's told is done. So, but like I said, I would love to spend more time in this world and get more characters and more stories and see where things kind of go, because there's a lot you could do with this going forward. But yeah, that's kind of my thought process and my perspective on the whole situation. So, but really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.